Thanks, Fuzi. Any thoughts on daily and weekly B bands for Bitcoin? Yeah. So, good question. With the B bands, they're pretty blown out right now. And when I say blown out is so with Bollinger bands, similar to the cloud, it is an all-inclusive system. Um, it is a system for trend. It is a system for dynamic support and resistance. It's a system for overbought, oversold signals, and something that's pretty unique to Bollinger Bands is they function, they forecast volatility. And this is kind of like the buzzword that John Bollinger uses, is that Bollinger Bands are a forecast for volatility. Actually, you know what we should do? Make a new note. Bollinger Bands. Forecast for volatility. And that's kind of like a little bit of a word salad, but essentially what it means is the more compressed the bands are, so meaning like you can see there's an upper band, a lower band, and a midline. The more compressed they are, the more consolidated the market is. And you can think of it like a spring, right? So if you have a spring that's like really stretched out, if you push down on it, it has a response. But if you compress the spring really tightly, it's going to have an even bigger response. So the more coiled the market is, or in this case, the lower the BBW is, the Bollinger Band width, the more coiled the market is, and the stronger the move is that resolves that consolidation. This means the more squeezed bands are, the more consolidated the market is, and we can expect whatever direction the breakout is will yield strong volatility. Right? Does this make sense? This concept right here is really important to wrap your head around, because when you're using Bollinger Bands, it's like you got to know what you're looking at, right? So the more squeezed the market is, the more consolidated it is, and the more we can forecast volatility. Now, I'll say implications, right? If the bands are squeezed, we expect strong breakouts. If the bands are, let's say, I forget the actual phrase that Bollinger uses. So he uses, Bollinger Band squeeze. But let's say if they are objectively wide, volatility is not expected to continue. So shut the hell up, Jack. I'm going to ignore you. You know what? I'm going to remove your sword too. You know what's funny is I think Jack is actually my first mod ever from like 2017. Anyway, so the implications are if the bands are objectively wide, the volatility is not expected to continue. So when we look at things like this, we really want to see compressed bands that do something like this. And you can see that, just because they're compressed doesn't mean they're going to break out. But you can see that it's like you're weighing potential. The tighter the squeeze, the bigger the bang. And so when we have something like this, where we can look down here, so Bollinger Band width, this is just a way to measure the width, like the distance between the upper and lower band. The lower the squeeze, the tighter the move. And we can see here that the breakout started, and once the Bollinger Bands start expanding again, that's an indication of a breakout. And we want to see this concept of riding the bands. Giving like a Bollinger Bands lecture here. Wasn't expecting to do this. So we have riding the bands. Riding the bands is just this general idea of like the candles like closing on the edges of the band, and that is an indication of a strong trend. Consecutive closes of candles on the upper or lower band that yields a strong trend. And we can also look at this as an overbought or oversold signal. So if the market gets sufficiently outside the band, it tends to mean revert to the band and try to continue, or it just kind of like dies. This is essentially just like a visualization of parabolic blow off. So say, for example, when we were looking back at the prior bull market, I'm going to show you a setup here. The prior bull market, we had these parabolic blow-offs, and eventually it went sideways. And when we look at the monthly candles, we can see a visualization of this quote-unquote parabolic blow-off. So you can see the squeeze on the bands, the riding of the bands, and then the subsequent parabolic blow-off that caused it to mean revert. It tried to continue the trend again, and it failed. And this is actually a Bollinger Bands M top. So there's a lot of setups using the Bollinger Bands. And when we look at something like the daily right now, we can see that like the Bollinger Bands aren't very consolidated. Now, that doesn't mean that the trend can't keep going, but it's just not a clean read. Something that is clean, though, is the fact that we're glued to this upper band. Now, if we reject this, or it starts floating like into the band here or something like this, see how it kind of like deviates from the upper band and it kind of just goes sideways? That's usually just a weak trend, and it's, it just doesn't have the gusto to keep going. Now, if we close this on the band and it keeps closing, that is objectively a strong trend. So at the moment, it has the potential for a strong breakout. It doesn't have a good clean squeeze that I would like to see, but this is kind of like an obscure pattern. You don't see these megaphone patterns often, and so there's not a whole lot of like references to pull from. Okay, so questions. That's a dirty innuendo waiting to have it pull your mind out of the gutter, sir. I don't know. This is a family show. What's the bottom indicator? So when you're looking at Bollinger Bands, you want to accompany the Bollinger Bands with Bollinger Band width. So say accompanying indicators, BBW, Bollinger Band width, and percent. Where's my percent? Percent B, which is essentially where the price is relative to the B bands. So you can see here that like so BBW is pretty straightforward, right? It's like the wider the bands. So here's a pretty big example, right? Wider the bands, the higher the number. The more compressed the bands, i.e. the width is narrow, the lower the number. So it's just an oscillator that shows you objective reads of the Bollinger Bands. Percent B is the positioning of the price relative to the band. So you can see here that like if we go back to our monthly example, right? This is how you would use the Bollinger Bands. You can see here that like the price gets sufficiently outside of the band, it's sufficiently high, right? It tries to close outside of the band, but it's actually inside the band, right? So this whole little like zone is inside the band, and this is just an overbought signal, so it's outside the band here, right? And you can see it here too, right? Now, what this means is when we're riding, we're doing this quote unquote riding of the bands, we should see it, we would expect to see something like this, where the market is, where the percent B is doing something like this, where it's not getting like divergence or anything like that. And we can probably find better examples on the weekly. So like here, for example, right? Last bull market was, this is the whole last bull market. You can see the market was riding the bands here. This is just a visualization of riding the bands. All right. You said that when there is a B band squeeze, the reaction of the squeeze after the squeeze can be violent. Yes. Can the reaction be either way, bullish or bearish? Just looking for a correlated pattern. Yeah. So there are ways to get sneak peeks into where the direction is going to be. And the way that we can look at Bollinger Bands is, you have it. It's basically just the market is like cut in half. If the market is trending below the midline, it is a bear trend. If it's trending above the midline, it is a bull trend. And when we're in consolidation type things like here, for example, this is an objectively, I'm using this word objective very intentionally because subjective tools kind of suck. We want objective tools to keep ourselves honest and our bias in check, right? So at the moment, the weekly trend is bullish, right? We are above the midline. It's sitting on the upper band. And prior to this, we saw objectively a bearish trend. It was chilling below the midline. So what we see here is going into the squeeze, we see a move to the upper band. And well, here's a better example because this actually played out, right? So here's a squeeze. The market makes a move to the lower band, and you can see the Bollinger Bands start to expand as the market goes to the lower band, and it births a new trend, right? Here's another example here. We have a squeeze. The market gravitates to this upper band, and it just rides the band all the way up, right? We see this over and over again. Again, squeeze, rides the band, keeps going all the way up. And on the downside, market has trouble breaking above the midline, goes into this big squeeze, and of course this giant move to the downside. Yeah, does that make sense? Bollinger Bands are great. They're a really, really good system, and they work on like medium and low time frames. So like you can actually use it on like 15-minute charts sometimes. You can see here like how it would work, right? Squeeze, gravitates to the upper band, and it rides it all the way up. So it's just a really good visualization of like how strong is this move, right? Another squeeze, goes to the upper band, rides it all the way up. You can see here like it's kind of like squeezing, it's expanding a little bit, it's squeezing. But ultimately, the big move that yields from it is preceded by this gravitation to this attraction to the upper band, and vice versa. So here's an example of the drawdown, right? Squeeze, gets stuck to the band,